Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Shad and the Resman. I am your host, Shad, and I am joined by my other host,
Resman.
Resman. Of course, this is the show that is hosted by Blackshad56 and DC Resman. Our first episode, we talked about pet parenthood, and well, that kind of got us thinking. Millennials. I know you guys are used to being shit on, and that's fine. Us Gen Zs are pretty close to that as well.
We
So
can
we're
relate
getting
to
there.
it.
We can relate to it to some degree. Exactly. We're kind of used to that a little bit. But I will say, you guys, if you do have kids, they're not the greatest, and if you don't, you typically tend to treat your dogs like kids. So we got a couple of topics to talk about from that aspect alone. This would be more or less, I guess, if we're gonna have to give it a title, I don't know, Gen Z's perspective on millennials.
Yeah, from
Sounds
fur
about right.
babies, from fur babies
Yeah.
to career millennials.
Yeah, it's a
So
career hurdles. Yeah,
career
exactly. I know
hurdles.
what you mean.
Pardon me, I
Yeah,
watched that
so
title, but
yeah, from fur
yeah.
babies to career hurdles,
So
millennials from a Gen Z perspective.
yeah.
So
Starting out with a spicy take, by the way, on the whole children and
yeah, go for it, go for it, go for it. I mean, shit, if you
well,
got one,
I
go
mean,
for it.
we came out swinging, but well, uh, why do you think? Let's first start off with just millennials and pet parenthood. Why do you think millennials are embracing their pets as children? Sort of like their
So
fur babies.
yeah, they're fur babies to some degree. So I think like realistically, it comes down to a either they don't want to have kids or they feel that they can't, like or they feel like they feel hopeful, they feel hopeless about finding a significant other and making children, or they're like, kids in this economy, the fuck you talking about, that kind of thing. And so from that perspective, it's like, okay, yeah, a dog is also significantly cheaper. Don't get me wrong, dogs are not cheap, or animals in general can be significantly cheaper whenever it comes to caring for them, when it comes to bills, when it comes to like vet bills, health bills, all this other stuff. Like, they are significantly cheaper. They do not last as long as I would say regular kids do. Obviously, dogs tend to age about 7 times faster than the normal human. So, sorry about that. I was losing my voice for a little bit. So, from that perspective, I think personally, I do think there's a lot of factors that go into it. I think it could be a loneliness thing. Like, at least if I have companionship, I can get it out of an animal, that kind of deal. Though, to grant it, to be fair, if you're expecting that out of a fucking reptile or a cat, good luck. Especially on the reptile aspect. So that's
Reptiles are as reptiles are as how'd you say they're as friendly as a cactus, I guess you could say.
that is one way
That's
of
their
putting
love
it. Yes.
language, I guess.
Yeah,
Love.
yeah. They tend to. They don't really know you all that well, even if you take care of them. They're just like, they recognize your scent. That's about it. I mean, don't get me wrong. So do dogs to some degree, but dogs like have unconditional love. Whereas I would argue reptiles really they don't. They don't feel. I mean, they obviously they feel pain, but they don't have like feelings, if that makes sense. Like, whereas a dog
Yeah.
or a cat, you can see them getting sad, you can see them getting happy, that kind of deal.
Yeah.
Especially with cats. Cats are, who, yeah,
Yeah.
they're bastards. Let's just put it that way. No, it makes it sound like I really don't like cats. I do. I enjoy cats. I'm just much more of a dog person. That's all it really comes down to.
Yeah.
When if you boil it down to like the basic of basics, I just prefer dogs. So from that perspective, as far as like the fur babies thing, it could just be, oh, I don't want to have a kid. I don't want to. I don't really feel comfortable having a child of my own, or I'm not perfect. Like, I have way too many different things that went on in my childhood. The last thing I need to do is raise another version of me. That kind of thing. Or, and for some people it is they can't have kids and they're okay with that. And for those people, I think that's a completely different realm of, that's really just a completely different realm whenever it comes down to it. Like, oh, if I can't have kids, obviously there is adoption, but adoption takes time, whereas adopting a dog, you can get the dog the same day, that kind of thing. Or a cat,
Right.
same concept, right?
Yeah,
So
definitely,
from
definitely something that we can discuss later on in this
Yeah.
discussion. So I obviously, you've got the personal you've got the budget, what you can afford to have.
Mhm.
And pets are easier. I'd say they're, easier to take care of, that compared to a child. You're not
Correct.
going to have I've heard some stories of pets, waking up their owners in the middle of the night, but a child is definitely going to wake you up. There's more training when there's, a child. And I would also say that, not everyone who owns pets, that treats their pets like, kind of like their fur baby, is really, it isn't that all of them that do that necessarily don't want to have children. It could be that they're preparing to have children. I know of quite a few people who own pets because, they're trying to prepare themselves for the future when they are financially prepared for that
Exactly.
to happen. So, and
And
so,
that's another thing. Yeah.
yeah.
Good.
So let's talk about social media trends about pet parenting. Obviously, it's a huge trend on social media, right?
Yeah, like you're some people have their own social media page dedicated to their pets, and I get it. Go get that bag, do whatever you wish. But the ones that always irritate me are the ones that's like, oh, it's actually run by my dog. I'm talking from my dog's perspective. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, fuck off.
There's actually a
Fuck
story I
you.
want to bring up with
No.
that.
Yeah. Whereas, like other ones where it's just like, oh, this is my dog. This is what I did with my dog today. Oh, hey, we're gonna promote a pet product, that kind of thing. Or they do like skits with their dogs. Henny and Olivia, which I don't think it's Henny and Olivia now because I think Olivia passed. I forget what the new corgi is called, but those are perfectly fine. I think those are harmless. But like the ones that's like, oh, it's run by my animal, I'm gonna talk like my animal. It's like, okay, shut the fuck up, stop it, stop, just cease,
Yeah. I'm actually
maybe
pulling
even
up.
cease to exist.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. There's actually a notorious or I wouldn't say notorious. That's a bad way to describe the celebrity, but Leona Helmsley is
Okay.
she was a billionaire and a hotel heiress. She left her dog $12 million in her will, and basically, kind of
Jesus.
this whole, curling her dog. Like she went all the way with
Yeah.
her dog. Basically, gave dog purse. Basically, had told. I think it was told. She told people how to take care of the dog. Feed it steak. Basically, that dog was treated better than any human could ever be treated.
Yeah.
But you
Jesus.
know,
Just.
that I mean, I guess there's something to that because that there are certain things that we enjoy that we like. That's like, man, we really got to take care of that thing, like no, like nothing else. And there's just I don't know what it is. Just there are people that are just really attracted to, I really got to take care of my pet like that. My pet should live the same life I live. Should have the same luxuries I have. It's kind of an interesting thing to talk about there.
I mean, don't get me
So
wrong. My parents told me throughout majority of my childhood, and whether or not you consider this a bad thing or not, they're never really truly meant it. I would say they were about 60% serious. They said that they like the dogs better than me. They like the dogs better than all of the kids, right? So from that element, obviously it was completely different, right? They did they treat the dogs better than me?
yeah,
No, I wouldn't say they did. Um, Obviously I got treated pretty well as a child. I have some issues like everybody does. Everybody gets trauma from different things, but from that element, it it just ultimately comes down to like there are people that treat their dogs better than people, and to that degree, I think it's really just they feel such a deep emotional bond with those animals, and like that's where you're getting a lot of these emotional support animals, and I completely wholeheartedly I back that. I understand, like if you have a lot of stress or you're prone to anxiety and that kind of things, and like it's bad enough that they need to medically give you a, like, for a medical or emotionally medical reason, they need to give you an emotional support animal. I do agree with that. I think that is something that should be done. I think that there are people that need that. But now, do I think you need a emotional support Komodo dragon? No, I think at that point you're just trying to cheat the system. It's like, I get it, because an emotional support animal can be taken anywhere. I understand that element, but
Well, I
come
mean, come
on.
on. Let's be honest, Christian. Alwyn's sitting in the back there just waiting to receive
Yeah.
some of that love.
Actually, no,
Yeah.
he's just kind of chilling there. I don't know if you can see him. He's right there. He's created a little crater for himself, and he's just
Yeah.
sleeping there. I don't know what it
Very,
is.
very Aldwin-like.
Yes,
Aldwin-like of
very
Aldwin.
Oldman like. Yeah.
Yes.
So, to that degree, I would much rather prefer my German Shepherd Diego as an emotional support animal. But even then,
Yeah.
I know for a
Yeah.
fact. And emotional support animals do technically need to go through training. At least if it's for a medical reason. Like, I know if it's a seeing eye dog, if it's a medical animal that knows, like, hey, this is where I keep my meds, blah 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 blah, blah, that kind of thing. Like, I know people that are prone to seizures, they have, and if they have a medication for it, their dog will usually, like, there's a way for the dog to make sure that they know, like, hey, you're about to crash out. Let's get you on the floor. Let's get you your meds. Let's get you some water. All that sort of stuff. So,
Right.
I completely understand having an emotional attachment to animals. I get it. For the most part, most animals, at least like the typical ones, of course, your dogs, your cats to some degree, that kind of thing. Like, they do have a deep emotional bond with you, and so from that, I get it. I get treating your dogs like your animals, or like your animals like your kids. I get the mentality behind it. It's whenever you're like overtly pushing it on people. That's where I kind of tend to have an issue
Yeah.
with it, where it's like, oh, our child, we got to get back to our child. And I'm like, okay, I say that ironically. Do not get me wrong. I call my dogs kiddos. I get it. Like, but that's an ironic thing. Like, obviously, yes, they are the closest I'm going to have to children for right now.
Right.
But, like, yeah, I call them kiddos.
Yeah.
But
It's
like,
more.
I
It's a
don't do that.
Yeah. It's a
It's a
nickname that
nickname.
expresses your love and compassion for your pets, obviously.
Exactly.
So
And it's, like, I'm not going to go out and say, like, oh yeah, I got my kids I got to go watch, unless I'm with somebody that knows what the hell I'm talking about. It's like, wait a second,
yeah.
you have kids. It's like, yeah, but they're on four legs. They're furry. They tend to drool a lot. They pant like crazy. And they eat dry dog food. Make that make sense. It's like, is it a
Yeah.
dog? Yes, exactly. Bye. And I just walk off. I kid, but
Yeah.
to some degree, I'm not kidding. I'm about 60% serious.
Yeah. So
Uh,
let's talk about some of the financial factors for pets versus what it means to have a child.
Well, I mean, especially if you look at childcare right now. I mean, childcare, I think for like per child, I think it's like $25,000 a year, depending on where you're at. If you want to get like especially if you're in a 2-income household, you got to have somebody to watch the kids, and you can't always rely on grandma, or you can't always rely on, hey, my buddy is off around this time, and you can't always take the kids with you. So to that degree, it's a factor of, you need something. Whereas a dog, for the most part, you can leave them by themselves. Same thing with a cat or any other type of pet. So from that element, it's that's a financially cheaper option, because they're not going to eat as much food. They pretty much eat whenever you let them eat, which, if you don't feed your dog, fuck you. Same thing with your cats or any of your animals. Fuck you. Go fuck yourself. That kind of element. But
Yeah.
so
Take
from
care
a
of your
financial
animals.
standpoint, yeah, take care of your animals. Seriously.
Yeah.
And
your children, of
next
course.
thing you know, we're gonna get promoted by fucking PETA or some shit. Which, by the way, PETA, if and when you ever decide to give us a promotion, I'm gonna humbly tell you to go fuck yourself. I cannot stand PETA. Like, don't get me wrong, animals are important. You need to keep them. But like, I remember I saw something and it was hilarious. It was a PETA ad. It was like a billboard, right? It literally, someone took a picture of it and they captioned it because it was a meme. It showed a dog, a cat, a horse, and then it showed a pig and so on, right? Like a pig and a cow, right? And
Yeah.
there's a slash after the horse. And it's like, is this where you draw the line? And someone literally just took a Snapchat photo of it and put, yep. I'm
Exactly.
like that's exactly how I feel about it. But back onto this, as
Yeah.
far as the financial aspects, children are expensive and they are an 18-year commitment, whereas dogs not always, that kind of deal. And like dogs don't need clothes. Don't get me wrong, I know people buy clothes for their dogs and you're
Right.
torturing those poor animals. I'm sorry, you really are. Uh especially with booties. Like I get it, I get you want to have your dog, like you want to have their paws protected, but it's like just get a fucking cream that you put on the paws. Seriously, just get the cream. You don't need to resort to the booties. It's weird, and I feel bad for every dog that I see. Don't get me wrong, I
I,
laugh.
I
I
I'm
laugh.
no I'm no Christian because some dogs have some executive power in this
Yeah.
corporate world. You never know whether a dog is gonna fart you or not. Who knows?
Well, yeah, to that
It's
degree, whatever, right?
uh,
But
but I just saw that it does say that to raise a child it costs up to from 18 to $21,000 to raise a child,
per
and
year.
yeah, per year, annually, that
Hmm.
is, and
Yeah, annually.
to raise to have a pet, the annual cost is 2,500 a year. uh,
Yeah,
so I mean,
significant cut in
yeah,
half. I mean, like not even cut in half. I would say cut like four different times. Like that's like
it
what, four times less or some shit.
yeah, it kind of goes
10
back
times,
to
something along those.
yeah, it kind of goes back to what we were saying about what you were saying about
What?
the
Have a
economy and the
kid in this economy? You
yeah,
fucking kidding?
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So from
It's
that element, I,
you
I
know
get it. I get
you
like don't
you
if you're hearing this, if you're
you know
hearing this,
what
don't think we're shitting on you if you treat your dog like a child or if you prefer to have dogs or cats to actual children. Do not think we're shitting on you. We are a little bit, but don't think we're entirely doing that. If we completely understand, it's just why are so many millennials doing it versus previous generations?
right. And I think you're seeing it a lot more with millennials and Gen Z than you are with previous generations. Not to
Exactly.
say that those
Even Gen
previous
X.
generations mistreated their pets. I know of a lot of people
Oh yeah,
who
yeah,
treat their
yeah.
pets great. It's just this sort of a fashion to it's become fashionable to treat your pets,
Like your
and
kids, or
yeah,
just have your pets
like
as your kids.
yeah, basically. And I forget where I was going to go with that.
Yeah.
But that's why we say that sometimes people have pets before they have kids because it's much cheaper to have them.
Exactly. It is a
Um,
significantly cheaper process.
and
I mean, hell, you could technically have 4 or 5 dogs for the price of one kid per
right.
year. And don't get me wrong, I would love to have 4 or 5 dogs. I don't have the space for it. I don't. I just don't. You know,
Right.
I want a corgi. I want another German Shepherd. Hell, I'll take a fucking Irish Wolfhound at some point too. Something along those lines. Like I want some big dogs. I want some small dogs. And it's just like I don't have the space. I don't have the money. That kind of deal.
Yeah.
But even then, it's just from the financial standpoint, hell, to some degree from the emotional standpoint, we get it. We understand. It's just we're trying to figure out why. And I think ultimately, not only does it come down to some of the emotional, but I think ultimately, like, if you have to choose, like, I think the number one reason is the cost. It is the financial element of it. It is the in this economy kind of element, that kind of thing. And so from that degree, I was about to make a joke. I'm like, well, yeah, I have to pay a pet deposit in the apartment, but they don't. I don't see no it's child deposit. They cause more damage than pets sometimes. Uh,
Yeah.
but it is what it is.
No.
Yeah,
But speaking of millennials and children, like last time I know we talked about pet insurance. Like with
pet
children,
insurance. Yeah,
there's a much greater. It's there are a lot more things that you have to take in consideration. You have life insurance, medical insurance, dental insurance.
exactly.
You've got, I mean, well, on top of that, of course, clothes, obviously,
Yes,
and then
clothes, food, if they're young enough,
yeah,
diapers,
you
baby
know,
food, all that type of stuff.
and then
So, God
when
forbid they want to get into sports.
and then you have school.
School's
There's
expensive.
you have a lot of other things going on with that. But it's like what they
Exactly.
say: when you have a child, you have a tax deduction. So
Yeah, there is that
that's
element
basically
to it.
what it
I will
is.
agree with that, but sometimes the tax deductions just don't cut it when it comes to how expensive a child is. And plus you got to
Right?
wait a whole year for that. So
Yeah.
from that degree, it's just yeah, you get a lot of dependents and everything. And of course, having a dependent is kind of nice for tax purposes, but it's just, like for how much money you would get back from that is going to pale in comparison to how much money you're spending on this child. God forbid you have more than one, right? So from that element, and like I feel like we're kind of harping on the financial factors, but like the emotional and lifestyle motivations, I do agree. I think that it comes down to what in this economy, you expect me to have a child, you expect me to buy a house.
Yeah.
Who the fuck are you? What do you think I do for a living? You think I'm fucking Trump's stool boy and I get paid $1.2 million every fucking day? No.
It's
It's,
not like everyone's a corporate executive at some high end bank or whatever. It's not.
exactly,
That's the average person in this economy. Let's talk about inflation real quick because
yes, let's get into this element. Go
yes.
completely off the rails.
No, but man, let me just yeah, like having a child, just having just everything that's involved with paying for what a child needs, is obvious. It's become so expensive, and also you want to go to college. Well, guess what? College wasn't what it used to be. It used to be cheaper. Did And
You
I'm
used to
not
be
going
able
to
to
get
go
in,
to college on a minimum wage job.
right? There's actually a story to why college became so expensive and why college loans became ridiculous. I'm not going to get into that. That's for a separate
Well, I
discussion.
think I
But
know, like, to put it like a TLDR on it, it's if I remember correctly, I believe the reason is it's because higher education became so sought after by millennials and by elder Gen Z, and to some degree Gen X as well. Like it became so sought after that it's kind of like with everything else. The more that people want to get it, the more expensive it's going to be. Whereas the less people get it, it's going to cut down in price because then they can't afford to spend the budget that they were spending.
right,
So from that element, and I also think, like, of course, government lending is a big thing too, but uh it's just, that, like, everybody's like, why is college so expensive? It's like, I don't know, did you notice the fact that there is an ice cream station on every fucking corner? The dorms have their own lounge area,
yeah,
and then those lounge, and I mean every single dorm has a lounge, that kind of thing. Like there's so many elements that go into it as far as how much colleges are spending, that it's like, yeah, that explains why it's so expensive, because then they realize, oh, we just pay for this shit and then they're paying us back tenfold. We
right,
could pay for it with 3 or 4 students, but the fact that we're getting hundreds of thousands of students, we just up the prices on that, we're making fucking bank,
right. College has
more or less.
definitely education it has definitely become a luxury. Well, it should go without saying that higher education, there's
Yes.
an element of luxury in that in and of itself, but it's
Oh,
become more
wholeheartedly.
and more of a luxury.
Hell,
But I
even
mean,
community college.
man, we can go really deep into this, but
We could, yeah,
it
we
would
could.
man,
It
we
would
can pull
have to
up
be
some
its own
numbers.
episode.
It would
Yeah,
have
it
to
would
we'd have
have
to
to
pull
be
up
its
some
own
numbers,
episode.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
but kind of going back to the children, let's transition because I know that we're not just talking about pets, we're talking about lifestyle because taking care of pets like your children has a lot to do with your lifestyle. So let's talk
Correct.
about just you know let's talk about just delayed parenthood and its impact. So why do you think so many people are don't want to have children, or at least the number of children they have has definitely
Significantly
shrunk
dropped.
down? Yeah. Why is it?
So again, I mean, I'm gonna sound like a broken record anytime we bring up the reasons why. It's got to be the financing element of it. So you can't get a loan for a child, and even if you could, you'd still be paying back God knows how much money. And so from that, it really is the financial element of it. And of course, everybody else would go, oh, well, there are people that work 3 minimum wage jobs and they have 15 kids. And I'm like, and more power to them. But most people don't want to do that. So from that element, like I mean, don't get me wrong, safe sex is a big element of it. Obviously, Gen Zs and millennials, we were taught that whether it's through schools or whether it's through parents or friends or family, whatever it is, right? We were taught safe sex is the best way to go. Depending on where your religious background is, obviously, there are some religions that adverse having safe sex and using contraceptives and everything,
Of course.
which
Of course, yes.
that's its own thing. We're
Yeah,
not going to
it's
go into
we're not
that.
gonna get into tonight, yeah.
So, from that element, I mean, it is the aspect of safe sex.
Yeah.
And you also have that part where, due to safe sex, you run the less of the risk unless you're just being careless or by some tragic accident. Like, don't get me wrong, if you have one kid, that could be described as, this is gonna sound harsh, could be described as an element of tragic accident, where it's like, I was on the pill, but the pills weren't working. We used a condom, but it broke. That kind
Yeah.
of thing. All that stuff. You could be as well prepared as possible.
What they call
And
happy accidents, so to speak. Yeah.
exactly what they call happy accidents. But
Yeah.
the moment that, if you're doing that every time and every time it results in pregnancy, either somebody's lying or somebody's lying. There's
I
no
feel
way
yeah,
around that.
somebody's
Like,
lying.
yeah.
No one's
Yes,
telling the
somebody's lying.
truth.
Either somebody's lying or you're lying to other people whenever you say, "Oh, we're being safe."
Yeah.
No, somebody's lying. So from that degree, it just becomes, you do have the lifestyle choices of, you have the element of the fact that there is safe sex being going on. But from there, it could, and this, I know this is a later topic, but, and we'll get into it a little bit more, but like, I would say dating culture has definitely changed. There's a lot more of a hookup culture versus a actual, like, oh, I'm going to go on a date and, with this person for a while. And, we may eventually move in together. We may eventually get married. We don't know what's going to happen. Now it's just like, oh yeah, cool. I got a date tonight and I'll be back at like 2 a.m. Peace. Like that
Yeah.
kind of aspect of it. Or at least that's an exaggeration, obviously. I'm not saying go on dating apps. Don't get me wrong. I found my fiance through a dating app. I will wholeheartedly admit that.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I know of a few
even
people
then,
that have found their true love through dating apps. I mean, it's definitely
exactly. And
yeah.
there are ways to do that. But I mean, you also got to remember, I went through that aspect. Let's see, that was my third or fourth time going through the rounds of doing dating apps. And it's not for the faint of heart. It's not for, I guess we'll just go ahead and skip into it. As far as the dating culture, it's not easy. And the problem is these apps are designed to make you addicted. They're essentially the same thing as a slot machine. And it's literally, there's a science behind it. And to that element, it just becomes a situation where it's like, you're gonna run into it where nobody's getting together anymore. Nobody's, I mean, obviously you still
Yeah.
have plenty of people that are, marrying and everything else, but it's just becoming a situation where, again, I bring up the loneliness aspect of it. That's again why some people prefer to treat their child, their pets as their children. It's not always just couples. There's plenty of people that are completely single. They treat their cat, their dog,
Right.
like a fucking child. And, to that degree, it's just, they're like, oh, well, I'm too lonely that I'm never going to have, that significant other and eventually have kids.
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, there's
furry dog,
right. I mean, there is that element in there, but do you also think that's a mental sort of thing? Like,
Yes, I
you have that
wholeheartedly agree with it.
you
It
have
is a
that
mental thing.
you have that lady
And
that owns a bunch
COVID
of
didn't.
cats, and it's just like
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Well,
like,
they actually,
is there something
there
going
might
on?
be a biological element into that as well. There's I don't want to go too far into it because I don't know enough about it, but I do know that there is something like, there's a fungi or a virus that is in cat feces that, if rats were to eat it, they actually fall in love with a cat. Like they literally have like this emotional attachment, and so they literally just don't fear cats. They'll actually go up to it. And with that, there's some people that are saying that, well, maybe that's a possibility it could be transferred into humans, because if you deal with enough cat feces, there you go, now you have 15 million cats. And so There could be a
Yeah.
biological element to it. There's no like hardcore research as far as I've gathered. There's no factual evidence around it, but there's a lot of people that are looking into it. It's like, okay, that would make some sense as to why, because like even if you go back into the ye olden days, of then before the 1900s, uh sorry, I didn't mean to hit my mic with the glasses. Before the 1900s, you do have elements of like there's always been that cat lady or the lady that lives in the streets and feeds the cats, that has always been. So to that degree, everybody's like, okay, well, what if that is the reason why?
Yeah.
That's why that's why these women, or there's even crazy cat dudes, like that's why they obsess over cats.
Yeah.
And I mean, some of it could just come down to personal preference, obviously, as well.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
what we're really talking about here isn't that, oh, there's this lady that, feeds the cats on the street and she's just helping out. It's an obsession.
yeah,
Like
like
there's
she has
something
a
psychological
hand
happening.
knitted cat sweater, and she's got
Yeah.
15 million cats going around her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from
So,
that element, yes, I would argue there is a mental aspect to it. Same thing with the people that, they're like, oh, I'm gonna run my dog's Instagram account as my dog, so if anybody comments, I'm gonna reply to them as my dog. It's like, okay, no, there's
right.
something mentally, there's wires crossing, there's the red wires and where the green wires supposed to be, like
The
there's something wrong
neurons,
there.
something's
Yeah, the
happening with the
neurons are
neurons.
misfiring.
Yeah.
One neuron's supposed to be hidden over here and it's heading all the way over there, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and not to call these people crazy, I'm just saying there's clearly something mentally not there, or they just think it's cute. And
Right.
even then,
Yeah.
then.
Now, going back to
So-
what we were talking about dating, I mean,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
obviously, we wait longer. I think there are studies that have shown that that generation that for further generations have had kids much earlier than where we're having kids in our age. But
yeah.
but I mean, let's just talk about dating. I mean, why do you think dating and like hookup culture and like, do you think that there's like some differences that have made us separate or made it difficult for us to connect to the opposite gender?
So I think ultimately you can caught a lot of key problems with millennials and Gen Z and now Gen Alpha. God bless Gen Beta to whatever fucking hellscape they're going to be born into.
The demise of everything they knew, they will live through it.
Yes. So I think ultimately, if you want to get like down to a key element, it is social media. And the reason why is because now we know everything about everyone so long as they put it on social media. And from that degree, hell, even to this degree, whenever it comes to podcasting, people are going to know how we think about things, right? So when it comes down to, I'm not shitting on social. Okay, I am shitting on social media. I'm not saying it needs to go away, but I am saying there's definitely a lot of different things that need to be done with it. So,
right.
In order to not sound like a broken record, obviously dating apps, they spawned from social media. Hell, Facebook used to be a Hot or Not clone, but it was on campus, and then it just became Facebook. So, if you're looking at it from that element of it, it's the fact that, we have these parasocial relationships with people, whether we like to admit it or not, whether we even acknowledge it or even know it or not. There are people that, and granted, that has been a thing since even before social media, but really social media blew it up, because now you can know about, oh, I do know what Sherry down the street does on Friday nights because she posted on Instagram, that kind of thing. And so from that, you have these, like you have this like, oh, my life isn't good enough because it doesn't look like that person's. And here's the thing. If you think that about yourself, I'm going to tell you this right now. Everybody has struggles.
Yeah.
They only post the positive shit on social media.
Right.
So don't try to live your life like somebody on social media.
Yeah.
Social
media,
you're never going to be able to get to it.
So social media only highlights the good parts in people. It never highlights everything else.
Either the drastically good parts or the drastically tragic parts. That's it.
But
That is the only thing social media.
more times the good parts. It's
Oh yeah, I would argue
more
it's
on the
a
good end.
90-10%.
And
Yeah, it's
so
like 90% good shit, 10% terrible
right.
shit.
But
That kind
yeah,
of thing.
but life is rarely 90% good or 90%
Oh
bad. It's a
yeah,
mixture of it all. It's
everything's a
something that you
little
have
bit
to
of a shade of
experience.
gray.
Yeah, but
Everything is a shade of gray. There is no black and white.
to get to your point that everyone has struggles and you should never compare yourself to what someone else is going through. That isn't just like a social media thing. That's a life
Oh
thing.
yeah,
You got to be careful with how you put your life into someone else's. Put your life
agreed,
into the lens of someone else's life, because you
agreed.
don't know everything that's going on. And this isn't just a, oh, I'm a man and oh, I want to be like that guy. This is a you know I know that there are women who struggle with this, and you think that men and women are any different, bro? Like, men and women struggle with the same stuff, just in like different ways. And so it's like we all have
Exactly.
crap that we deal with. You just don't see the worst parts of it, and you don't see when parts are boring. You don't. It life is honestly life is actually kind of boring most of the time, but
Yeah.
you know every now and again it gets good, and every now and again it also gets bad. But I'd say social media at the end of the day, I think it's a distraction. I think that's how I see most people use it, is when they're bored, they just pull up social media,
It's a
right?
way to escape
Yeah.
technically reality,
It's
and
it's a I
to that
wouldn't even
degree,
say
that's
reality.
fine. Hmm.
I'd say just escape the boringness, which
Hmm.
I yeah, again, reality. So it's just
Yeah.
to escape being bored. Just, oh,
Well,
okay, let me
and the
just
other
look it
thing
up.
is the problem with that is that tends to cut at creativity, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, it
Because
does.
if you're like constantly online, some of the best and worst, do not get me wrong, there is some stupid shit I have thought of when I was bored. But boredom leads to thinking outside the box. It leads to creativity. It leads to a bunch of different things. And the problem is if you're never fucking bored,
You're not gonna come up with those
you're not gonna
ideas
you're not gonna
because
come up with those ideas.
it's blocking.
You're not
Yeah,
gonna have a way of like, okay, well, what if your phone dies and you can't get to a charger? Well, what the fuck are you gonna do? You're gonna sit there and
right.
just go like, okay, well, so
There's
like, are you just
yeah.
gonna shove your thumb up your ass, that kind of thing.
I think
And so
yeah.
it's
I th-
yeah, go ahead.
Anyways, sorry for interrupting you, but it
No,
just
no,
brought
no,
up a
you're good.
thought that, I mean, I know that when I was going to school and, you know, performing music, and there were some compositions I wrote, some songs I wrote as well, where there, a part of the process was, okay, you might go on
Boredom.
social media. Yeah, but it was also boredom. Like, that was the
Yeah,
main process. It's like, what do I do? Where do I go from here? Like, I don't know. Well, guess what? Well, you got social media, but just literally allow yourself to be bored. Like, that's it. Is
exactly.
And then
That's the
just
main
let
thing.
it marinate. Let whatever's going on just marinate for a little bit, and then kind of go back to it, and then yeah, and then you can kind of go with other stuff. But social media is very much a distraction, and I think it. And there's also the element of getting a dopamine hit from watching shorts and different videos where you're just like, it's just wired. And
Hmm.
the normal the dopamine hit that you would get in a relationship with somebody is replaced with social media. I also think that that's the case as well. You've also got
Well, yeah,
unrealistic body standards
and
being
that I
portrayed on
would
social
argue
media.
goes into like porn addiction and other stuff like that.
Yeah,
So I would argue social media can lead to a porn addiction, but I would also argue that porn addiction can lead to social media addiction as well. I think that they tend to go hand in hand. It's the
right.
factor of being chronically online, whether it's on your phone, whether it's on on your desktop, on your laptop, whatever it is. When you have countless ways to have instant access to the world and what it has to offer, of which 90% is porn. Even before the internet, I mean, it's just been a thing. So when it comes to porn, I'm not going to say like it's porn can be healthy in very, 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 very minimal exposure. Overexposure fucks with you, and it leads to different types of depression. It can lead to aggression issues. It can lead to lack of sex drive. It can lead to
Yeah,
there's a lot of different things it can lead into.
right.
And it's one of those things. It's hard to admit it, but like it's not just a guy thing.
Yeah,
Trust
everyone
me, it's not just a guy thing.
everyone
It's an
deals with
everyone
this.
thing.
Let me put it this
Exactly.
way. I wouldn't say that everyone struggles with pornography, but I'd say like 90% of the world. Anyone who says I don't struggle with
Porn
sexuality in the
addiction.
sense that, yeah, like in the sense that
Yeah.
I look at somebody and I'm genuinely attracted and I lust and I'm obsessed with them, like in that sense, like porn. Anyone
Mhm.
that says that, I'm like, you're full of crap. Like I know you're lying
Oh yeah.
because yeah, I see that as more of like a self-righteous thing. I mean, and
Yeah,
again,
it's
not
like, oh,
everyone
look
deals
at
with that.
me. I am
Yeah.
woe is me. I am better than the common petty
I'm
person.
better than the commoner. Thank you very much. I'm better than you,
Exactly.
you peasant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It, but
It's
yeah,
a, or if someone, to that degree, again, it comes back to social media, and it's like, oh no, I don't struggle with that. No, that's an everybody else thing.
yeah.
But anyways, did I mention that I have a course? It's and that being said, the Shad and the Resman course is in
we
active development. No,
we help men overcome pornography,
and also
overcome their
how to
porn
become
addiction.
rich.
Exactly. Try out the stock trading course that we have available to you at 99.99.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Or actually, if you just directly cash at me, uh,
I
we'll
have a
send you
cell,
a
by the
link to
way.
this course. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We will instantly send you the link. No, we kid. And
Yeah.
another thing, a hint of advice for anybody that is listening that doesn't know this. If you're on the internet and someone's selling you a course that isn't
Okay.
like a cooking course or a how to do,
Yeah.
XYZ with your computer course, um, if it's anything about getting financials, it's a scam. I'm telling you right now.
Yes.
If it's anything like, oh, you're gonna get bitches, you're gonna get money, it's probably a pyramid scheme or it's just a scam.
Yeah. And I know we're segueing, but we're going to eventually come back. But on the topic of that, because I know that there are people who are victims of
Yes.
that, and I think this has a part to do with it, with dating life and cultures, the money you have the
Yes.
potential to get into relationships that you want. There's
Exactly.
that element, but I mean, in reality, honestly, life is never supposed to be easy. And if you think that there's an easy way, like there's this quick way of making money, there
No.
is no quick way of getting wealthy. Success is bloody. It's
Well,
hard. It's agonizing.
I do know one way to get quick, to get money quick. It's just depending on how well and how willing you are to do it. See, you take a gun and then you go to a bank
And then you rob the
and then
bank.
you rob the
There you
bank.
go.
Exactly.
Problem solved. We just all
Yeah.
rob banks. That's how we make a living.
Exactly.
Anyways, yeah. But there's no quick way to success. And but
No.
anyways, to come back again to these relationships, speaking of money, um, how do you think our career choices affect the dating culture that we're in today?
So, I think to that degree, it's gonna definitely be a different element. As far as like career choices that lead to dating, that's a hard link to find. Obviously, everybody wants to make enough money to not only take care of themselves, but of course potentially take care of somebody else, something else that can lead back into this whole. Well, I have enough money to take care of a dog, so therefore I'm gonna get a dog. That kind of thing, right?
Right.
So from that, it just becomes, you know, as far as the dating element, I do think that as a whole, and I'm not gonna say women. I'm not gonna say it's just a men or women thing. It is a genuine everybody thing. I
Right.
think, and this is maybe just coming from an American perspective, I have no idea as far as everywhere else in the world. I want to make that very perfectly clear. I do think that as a whole, Americans are obsessed with what your financial status is. And that is beyond fucking stupid because of the fact that we do have an ever shrinking middle class. And
Yeah.
whether you agree with me or not, it is still beyond stupid to be that focused on, oh, he only took me out on a pizza date. that must mean he's
Okay.
broke. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I am also
Wait,
not going to spend 500 fucking dollars on a date for a person that I've
all
never even
right.
known.
Well,
And
you got a problem with
yeah,
pizza? Come on, man.
yeah, exactly. Who
Yeah.
fuck? I mean, unless you're lactose intolerant or allergic to tomatoes or some shit, who the fuck
Yeah.
has a problem with pizza? Hell,
Yeah.
I'm lactose intolerant and I fucking adore pizza. I'm just not as bad. You know,
Scrumptious.
it's like
Yeah.
I'm not as bad. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Money, man. Would you mind if I pulled up a script on this? Can I do that real quick?
Go for it. I would just say keep it very vague. You know, or keep it brief.
Okay.
Sorry, those for you that don't know, Resman over here is a religious person. No, I'm kidding.
Yes.
I'm not kidding about the fact that he's a religious person. I'm just teasing him on it.
No, but religion is something that we will talk about in the future.
At some
Um,
point, we plan to. We don't know when that will be. We're not going to tease it just yet.
um,
Did you find it?
yeah, I'm almost there.
Okay. So before you get to that, speaking of which, have you noticed the rise of freelancing, side hustles, and non-traditional career paths? Because I've noticed it. Hell, even I've participated in some of it as well, as far as the freelancing element or trying to get a side hustle going. Um, you know, I mean, hell, I've joked around saying like, yeah, my animal's gonna have an OnlyFans account because they're gonna rake in some type of money because I can't afford rent. You know, that kind of thing. So, Dalton, and this one's kind of going towards you. Have you noticed it? Do you have any thought processes on it as far as freelancing or side hustles or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I think freelancing and side hustles are really good, especially if you're trying to build a little extra income on the side. Um,
Agreed.
I think right now many people are getting into side hustles because they feel um, they feel like their primary job isn't doing enough, and maybe what they're earning won't get them into retirement, or that it's just right
Mm-hmm.
now the really right now what's going on is that a lot of consumers are worried about not being able to afford uh, food, not being able to purchase a car for their children, not being able to afford to pay their rent, and which was basically what was going on 2022 and 2023 was that you had people,
Correct.
just basically I can't afford a house. I'm just going to rent. You had that whole thing on rent, and then
Exactly. Yeah.
and on top of that, the whole car market crashed. So basically, it it's people are trying to find new and creative ways of making money. So
Agreed.
because things are getting more expensive.
They are. And, you know, from that, I mean, you definitely, this would be more of like, this is Gen Z's kind of explanation of where we are as far as what our generation really does. Now, of course, we can't speak for our entire generation. We can really only speak for ourselves. But from that, you know, as far as the job market and our work ethic, we are notoriously, as a whole, generation wise, we are notoriously told that we're lazy because we job hop, or we do the bare minimum, or it's we can't find a job. Well, have you tried this? Yes, I've tried everything that actually fucking works. I hate to break it to some boomers, but here's the problem. You used to be able to go into anywhere, and we're not talking about just boomers in general. We're talking about we're talking about this is maybe 20 years ago. You used to be able to go into any job with your resume, or if it was online, it's like, okay, hey, where can I go for a job application? You used to be able to do that, walk in and be like, hey, can I talk to a hiring manager and see what positions you have open? You used to be able to do that. They don't really let you do that anymore because nobody
Yeah.
has physical job applications anymore unless it's a mom and pop shop. And from that element, I mean, you have those places that everything's moved to online. And the problem with that is when everything's moved to online, you can't do a face to face or anything along those lines. And because you got to get through the whole process in order to get an interview, it's harder to get a job because it's not anymore about what you do or how you approach it. It's who you know. Who do you know in this job?
Right.
That's how you're going to get it.
It essentially, what do they call that? Networking is what that's basically what they
Yes,
call that. But anyways,
exactly.
I found I think I found what I was looking
Okay.
for. It says in 1 Timothy 6, verse 10, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many
Mhm.
griefs," which is basically what you see happening with a lot of people today. Is that,
Correct.
going back to the whole get rich quick thing, people are desperate. They're like, I need money. And then of course, there are people who really don't need more money. They just want it. They don't think there
Yeah.
isn't enough. And then they go
Exactly.
and they participate in some of these courses, and then it turns out that they either wasted money or that they were a victim of scam and fraud. And
Exactly.
there you go. That you have to be careful of
You
where your
do.
heart is on money, basically.
Exactly. And don't
So
get me wrong, if someone's offering help with researching on how to get certain elements of money, or like someone's like, hey, you could go do this, obviously that's not a scam. But as far as like anybody's like, oh yeah, if you follow these 3 simple steps, you can make $100,000 today. It's like,
right,
okay,
that's not
no,
right.
the fuck you
Yeah,
can't. Yeah,
success
it's like,
isn't
what are we
three
doing?
simple
Robbing a
steps.
bank? Yeah, I was gonna say, what are we gonna do? Rob a bank? It's like, yeah, step one, get a gun. Step two, go to your local bank. In step
Step
three,
three,
rob
point
the
it at them.
bank.
Exactly.
You can walk out with $100,000 plus if you get away. It's just
Exactly. All the
watch
while,
out for die packs.
all the
Just
while, the Joker's like, it isn't about the money. Lights it
yeah,
up in flames. Exactly.
exactly. Yeah,
so,
exactly.
so,
Yeah, and
yeah.
yeah, as far as like the root of all the money obsession, I do think that there is a desperate element to it as well. Obviously, there are people that, whether they want to admit it or not, they do worship money. Hell, this was a commentary even back in the '80s with the mega consumerism. There's a great film if you want something that is a commentary on consumerism, especially of the '80s, but even to this, even till today, honestly, it still holds up incredibly well. I'm surprised it hasn't been remade. It's one of the simplest things to remake. Um, it's called They Live. It has Roddy Piper and Keith David in it, and it's a really fun movie. Don't get me wrong; it's a slower start, as are most John Carpenter films, I would argue. Um, it is one of the slower starting movies, but once you get through it, it actually does pick up and go. Pretty much as soon as the main character gets the glasses, and
Yeah.
this is the movie that. Okay, for all my '90s babies out there. You know the line from Duke Nukem, I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum. I've actually had this argument with somebody, so before anybody tells me, oh, you're fucking nuts, I am. But that's a different story. What I'm saying is, They Live is the one that popularized that phrase, and Duke Nukem took it. They didn't steal it. I'm not saying they stole it. I'm just saying they took it and put it in the game because it's a pretty badass line. So, I've had this argument with somebody in high school, and whoever the fuck you are, if you know who I am, or if you've listened to this, also hi. But secondly, I'm telling you, the movie came out in the 80s. The video game came out in the 90s. I'm not wrong on this. I know I'm not, because I know movies and I know video games. Video games weren't really a thing till the fucking 90s. Sorry, that's been a thing that's been on my chest for quite a while. My point being, if you want a great commentary on like consumerism to the nth degree, is it like an A24 commentary? No,
Yeah.
I just told you one of the lines, which was, I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and this is a guy that goes into a bank with a shotgun and a pair of sunglasses on
Yeah.
with a mullet.
Wait.
So
Now,
no.
wasn't what that was the one where there were aliens, and when he put on the
Yes,
glasses, he saw
aliens
them.
were
Yeah.
in control, and they had all
Yeah.
these different signs that were showing, like, A, they disguised the aliens, and B, like
It
all
was.
the billboards and all
Yeah.
that other stuff. So
It was
uh
it also made it made the whole brand Obey. Like that's where the Obey brand came from,
exactly,
was that movie.
yes, and
So
consumerism in its finest.
exactly. We all serve a god.
I Yeah, exactly.
Money,
And I when I'm
we buy
exactly, so
stuff, I don't
money.
know.
So what's funny is there's a point where he literally sees a guy with a handful of cash, like a couple dollar bills in his hand, and it literally, whenever he puts on the glasses, says, "This is your god." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, okay." So it's not like the most okay. It is pretty overt commentary, but it is a
Right.
really good, like, again, I'm surprised nobody's remade it. Hell, if I ever got into the film industry and ever, you're like, all right, you get to make whatever movie you want, I'm like, with John Carpenter's permission, hopefully he's still alive by that point, I want to remake They Live. And it's like, who are you gonna get? I'm not getting John Cena. I'm not getting John Cena. As much as I like John Cena, no, it's not happening.
You can't see
I
me.
may get
That would work perfectly. You can't see me.
wouldn't yeah. I don't know. I think genuinely, as far as like remaking it, it would be interesting to remake. I don't think it's impossible. Out of all the other Carpenter work, I would argue like Escape from New York, a very 80s movie. Uh They Live is a very 80s movie, but the commentary is timeless. So you can change up so many different elements. So my point being, going back into it, is we do tend to have an obsession with money, and I think that ultimately affects the dating culture because every girl has been told, oh, you're a princess, or even if they haven't, they expect princess treatment, and it's like I get that. However, I don't fucking know you. Why are you expecting me to spend $300+ on a steak dinner for somebody that I don't even know? Now, if I get to know
Right.
you and I really like you by the third date, yeah, I may go get you steak dinner. I don't know. But that took time for me to know you. I'm not going to take some random person off the street, be like, I'm mildly attracted to you. Let's go have a $400 plus dinner. And it's like, no, that's not happening. So the people that expect that, I think, are nuts. And they're very materialistic. They're like, oh, well, you only got me flowers and you only took me to go, like, we walked around the park and we went and got ice cream afterwards. Ugh,
Yeah.
ick.
It's very
Come on.
ungrateful.
It's Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
ungrateful. It's like,
And
look, I'm on a fucking
that
budget, bitch.
yeah
What the
that
fuck do you
let
expect?
let's put it this way: if a girl does that, right?
Yeah.
That don't date her. Like it's that simple because
Oh yeah.
she just isn't for you. Let's put it that way, right? And
Exactly.
don't get me wrong, there are guys that have their thing, but
Oh yeah,
if
yeah.
you're
They
if
have
you're
that element to it
yeah,
as well. It's like,
I
oh,
know
what the? I
yeah
bought you steak dinner and you're not gonna have sex with me. Like,
yeah
don't get me wrong.
there's
There
that
is
element,
that.
right?
Yeah, there is the
And
opposite element of it as well. And again, we're not saying that this is all men and all women. No, obviously that's a broad brush to try to paint everybody with
right,
that, and it's just not gonna work. So
it
like, hell,
yeah
again, my fiance and I, we went and had a pizza date, and then we went and got ice cream afterwards.
yeah
That was our first date. That's it.
yeah
That's all it was. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. And the second date we had, we went to Denny's, and then we went to Scarborough, and that was all. That was like a last second attempt. And then it just went from there. So here we are, almost 2 years later, and getting married.
there you go,
There you
right?
go.
I'm
All right.
awesome.
So
Yeah,
I'm not gonna say that that's gonna be everybody's story,
no,
obviously. And I think a
no,
big part of it as well, whenever it comes down to it, is we were already kind of teetering off from having big communities, like very well knit together communities. COVID just completely killed it. And now, I mean, we do have communities, but they're so drastically small that you can't really have a dating pool anymore.
it's very
And
difficult to find that pool where people are dating, or I don't want to use the term dating around, but kind of
yeah,
finding out what really works for them.
that's what swingers are
So,
for. No, I'm kidding.
well, very funny. Yeah.
I'm very funny. Thank you for noticing.
Yes.
Uh, yeah. So I mean, like with that, it's just, I think that that's ultimately what kind of destroyed the dating scene, the community as a whole. So
Yeah.
before that, and like, okay, this is not me bringing up like, oh, we need to have church back. Like, no, obviously church never went away. It's just people don't go to church anymore, and not even for the religious aspect. It's just from the community aspect. Nobody goes. And that used to be a big way for people to either meet new people, or you met new
Yeah.
people by going to malls, you met new people by going out, you talked to people. But now
Right.
everybody is so closed off, they're terrified. Like, a lot
Yeah.
of women, I would argue, are terrified of guys. Hell,
Yeah.
perfect example, right? I get done with a workout this morning, right? I know I don't look like I work out, I just got back into it. Fuck
Christian
you.
works out
Uh,
actually a lot. He works out a lot. So, yeah.
totally, totally.
Bro,
It's the
don't you
reason
have a
why,
gym at work? Don't you have a gym at work though? You used to the place that you did work. You did
sir,
have a gym.
sir. I don't work there anymore.
I'm just saying. I'm trying to
I
help
know.
you out,
Yeah, I
man.
did. I know it was, and I have an apartment gym, but perfect example. So I went to the apartment gym today, and the elevator was broken, so we had to use stairs to get up to the treadmills because all the weight stuff is downstairs. The treadmills are upstairs. So yes, I am obviously panting. I go to try to use the elevator, doesn't work, and I go downstairs and I notice somebody's coming up, and I kind of pop out of here, but I go hi, but I'm panting, so I'm like hi. And this woman, I would argue, yes, she is cute. Sure, fine, whatever. But that wasn't my intent. I was just saying hi to be friendly. She gave me
Yeah.
this look like,
Like,
"Who the
who are
fuck are
you?
you? Why are you
Why are
saying
you talking to
hi?
me? Right.
Yeah, why are you talking to me?" And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, and like whether or not that was out of like, oh, she's a prude, or oh, she's genuinely scared. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not the best, not the most
Right.
physically attractive guy, and so
Right.
I get that element, but it's like
Or yeah.
you have people that think, and
Or it's like,
this is
what's the big
primarily a
deal?
women thing.
Yeah.
They think that everybody's either trying to hit on you, or they think that they're gonna do something worse. And
Right.
I think that part of that is, it's just you don't have a community anymore. Nobody really
Right.
knows each other anymore. I'll make everybody who's listening to this a bet. How many of you actually know your neighbors? Dalton, you don't count. I
Oh,
know
come
you know
on,
your
man.
neighbors.
Come on,
Yeah, yeah.
man.
I
I don't
barely know
count.
any of my neighbors.
Wow.
Yeah, you don't
Well,
count because you do know your neighbors.
well, you do too. There's a guy who lives above you.
Well, yeah, that's because my girlfriend noticed, or my fiance noticed, that he was a cop.
Yeah, I guess so.
I've never met the person.
Fair enough.
Like, I've never seen the person,
But
never met the
yeah,
person.
I
Don't know.
would I would also make I would also say that like this sort of like you said communities, because I think this like the whole like the maybe like I wasn't there, but there I've talked to various people who have given me like that look of what, like why are you
Why
talking
are
to me, or
you
like
talking to me?
what's the big deal or whatever. But
Yeah.
I think honestly that really comes from like a maybe a lack of social skills. I genuinely think that's a lack of social skills, because it's like,
I
bro,
agree.
like we're communicating. Like that's wait, you want me to not say anything? Like,
Well, and where do you
it's a
primarily
body
where
cues,
were you used where did you used to learn a lot of your social skills? From school and from the community.
right?
That's where you learned
And
it.
I would agree with that with the whole COVID thing, because once everyone
COVID fucking
went on a
killed it.
pandemic, it was like
Yeah.
now all of a sudden now it's basically you're not even surrounded by people, even people you don't know, which I think is also useful, is to know how to you know
Mm-hmm.
you
How
know
to navigate through
maneuver,
life.
yeah, navigate through that. But now you're not meeting anyone new, so it's everything in your contacts, everyone in your basically in your contacts, and
Yeah.
nothing much beyond that, which which is problematic. I think it's, and don't even get me
Oh, yeah.
started on the dating culture in the church, because I've had conversations uh, with sisters in the church about how bad the dating culture is. Hardly anyone dates in the church. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
bro, like hearing that someone dates is like, how did you do that, dude? Like, and it's not
Yeah,
just a
how'd you
guy
pull that
thing.
off?
Yeah, it's not just a guy thing. There are women in the church who are like, they want to date, but no guy is going to step up to the plate and be like, yeah, let's date. And so even then, even when there is a community, there's clearly something wrong. I think that
I
there's a
agree.
detachment. Something is detached,
Yes,
and
and part of that ultimately comes to a lot of people are chronically online, or at least if
yeah,
they are online, they stay in their echo chambers. And the problem with staying in your echo chambers, you're never going to get an outside perspective. That's a problem for one, for just in anything in life. We're not even talking
yeah,
about a relationship aspect. We're talking about like just navigating through life. You have to have outside perspectives. You can't just tunnel vision the rest of your life. Or otherwise you're going to be miserable. And then
yeah,
you're going to realize like, "Oh, I don't have anybody."
and it's
And
going to be a
that's
very
what I think
lonely
a
life.
lot, exactly, and I think
Yeah,
that's what a lot of people are realizing. But a lot of people are just so tied down and used to it that they can't get out of it. And it's a very difficult thing to do. I'm not going to say it isn't. Hell, even when I was going on dating apps, I still tried to talk to people outside, you know, like I still tried to like go to malls or go to the gym or go do whatever. I still tried to talk, you know. It's not that I didn't, but again, you know, the part of the problem is like you know, hell, when I was single, I worked at a location and I got to interact with people all the time. I tried to flirt with one girl and I noticed that she had a picture of, because it was something to do with cars. I noticed she had a picture of her husband, which I did not realize was her husband. I asked if it was her brother. She was mildly attractive, so I started flirting with her a little bit. I actually almost got in trouble over that, genuinely.
Right.
And because she brought it up, she's like, "Oh, this guy was very aggressively flirting with me." I wouldn't see it as aggressive. I would see it as overt, but not aggressive. And again, you know, different perspectives.
Yeah.
So, and she, you know, she's like, my husband was obviously clearly in the photo, and you know,
She
don't get
didn't.
me wrong, I finished the
Yeah.
job that I needed to do,
Right.
but you know, like as soon as she said that, I was like, oh, okay, my bad, I apologize. Very good looking guy, and then I went back to work. You know, that's exactly what I did. So, you know,
Yeah. The social
and
stigma of flirting
yeah,
with women is definitely different than women flirting with
agreed.
men. I gotta say.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so, and
And yeah,
uh,
it's a big issue. And again, like I said before that, you know, we were already starting to teeter away from community. And then you have that element of the pandemic lockdown, and community I think ultimately just died right then and there. Now don't get me wrong, do I think there are still communities out there? Do I think that there's still ways to do it? Yes, but it's not as nuanced as it once used to be. Now it's a lot of, if you don't agree with me on one particular thing or all particular things, I will not talk to you.
right, or I will demonize you, or
I will
I won't
demonize
tolerate.
you,
Right.
or
Yeah. Which
yeah, exactly.
I think is all. Honestly, I think that's really, if you want to draw what I think is really wrong with society today, is that we easily demonize each other. Like, we're really quick
Oh
to
yeah,
just draw
we're quick to draw
conclusions.
the
You're
gun.
bad.
Yeah.
You're evil. Like, what is it? You know, we there are people who call people Nazis and that stuff. Like,
Hmm.
dude, like,
Agreed.
how are we ever going to communicate when we're always throwing these words at each other, trying to make each other, like, just bash each other? We're not going to get anywhere, which boils down to the next thing, which is, which I think that dating culture, I think there's an
I
element
feel like
of.
this is a completely different subject for a completely different time. That's what I feel like this is. I feel like this needs to be its own episode, because we're very 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 uh involved in this, I would say.
Yes, we'll have
So
to
and
create a
we're kind
part
of we're
two.
kind of yeah. We'll probably do dating culture and everything.
Yeah.
So back onto the millennials from the Gen Z perspective, but this time we're basically just gonna, at this point, I think we're gonna wrap it up after this. But I think that um we're ultimately gonna kind of explain our work ethic and everything and how it comes across, right?
Right.
So, you know, going into that, it's as far as like Gen Z's doesn't want to work. That is a huge misconception. We are desperate to work. It's just we don't want to work in conditions that are, let's just say, borderline. They shouldn't be illegal, but they feel like they should be, you know? Like mandatory overtime. I get it. I understand that that's something that needs to be done sometimes. But, you know, obviously there's going to be people that's just going to rub them the wrong way. Right? You know, obviously as Gen Z, we tend to try to focus on our mental health and a work-life balance. And we want a career to fit in with that. And the problem is a lot of these careers, they don't want you to have that. They would rather you be like, either, you know, this is basically, you have your work outside, you have your life outside of work, and you have work. Sit. Done. Concise, to the point. But we expect you to spend at least 80% of your life, what's left of it at least, here.
Right. Well,
And that's the problem.
what I was gonna say before you interrupted me, Christian,
Yes.
was I was trying to transition into that. I didn't
Yeah.
appreciate you interrupting me there, because I was trying
I
to
apologize.
transition.
That's my
But
bad.
going into the careers, because I know that another aspect of dating culture, was that, the career roles for men and women have changed, and
Yeah.
that obviously being another aspect of it all. But let's continue on
Yeah.
with what we're going into here. I think everything
Cool.
about dating we've already basically just went
We more or
over.
less touched on it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Long
So
tangent, short.
yeah,
Dating
so
culture is fucked. Let's just put it at that.
there's still hope out there. But
We're
anyway,
still hope.
so
Yeah.
so let's talk about, obviously careers. I'd say honestly, another aspect of careers is just just honestly technological development. Things are not the
Yes.
same, and I hear a lot of people saying, well, what, do this, do that. Why weren't you like, basically, well, people, they don't deliberately say this, but essentially comparing, giving advice to people who are in Gen Z, where
Mhm.
it applied to them in the past, but it no longer applies to Gen Z now. And so
Exactly.
in the past, there were different jobs in the past. I would argue that there were arguably more jobs potentially. You know,
There was a more diverse field of
yeah,
jobs. Let's put it that way.
there's a more diverse field, and so there's I mean there let me tell you, I mean, with AI and that stuff,
Hmm.
the way I see it is, how are we going to, how I mean, what do we really expect from AI to create, to create more jobs for people to participate, or is it really, if we're to be honest, I think it's only going to make it more difficult for us to have a job. I would argue that for I think people who want a job in art, it's going to make it much more competitive. It's going to make it
Oh yeah.
much more difficult. So the whole, well, why don't you just do this? Why don't you do that? I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it still goes back to networking, but
Mhm.
it's like the rules are changing, and they're changing generation by generation. And
And the
so,
problem is those generations, the changes are coming sometimes two or three times per generation now. I mean, look at us. I mean, we lived through a drastic change in cultural shift as far as going from having a pretty decent balance from being online and in real world to now we're almost drastically entirely online. Hell, we're literally calling through a Discord call instead of actually meeting up and recording this.
all right,
That
eventually,
element.
eventually we'll
Eventually,
have a
yes.
room.
Eventually, yes.
Yes,
We will have a studio eventually if this
yes,
catches on.
yeah.
Um.
I already have an idea for it too, but
Oh, me too.
that's
Yeah.
later time.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have that element of it. And then we also lived through the pandemic. We lived through the end of the Afghanistan war. We
Yeah,
lived through, all these drastic, hell, the confirmation from the government of aliens existing. That literally got swept underneath the rug. We lived through, we've lived through world changing war after world changing after world changing events. And it's not just us at this point, it's a lot of the elder Gen Alpha too, because Gen Alpha, I believe the cutoff, the beginning of them is 2010, 2011, somewhere around there, I believe.
yeah,
So, you add that on top of it, and a lot of the Gen Alpha is like they're starting to enter the workforce, the elder Gen Alpha. They're starting to get to the point where they're entering the workforce, because like 2010, that was 15 years ago. A lot of them are going to be a lot of them are going to be getting into jobs. I mean, yeah, and like by the time you and I are 30, shit, we're done. It's
yeah,
Gen Alpha's world at that point. And we're gonna be the in-betweeners. And because a lot of the boomers are gonna go away. And then you have the Gen Xers and the millennials, they're gonna be the elders. And then you have us and Gen Alpha. It's just a scary time, man.
yeah.
It's a terrifying time.
It's
Right?
interesting, definitely. So
Oh
it's
yeah, wholeheartedly it is.
there's yeah,
Yeah.
no,
So, from that element, I think that honestly, us kind of changing the landscape as far as the workforce, the millennials kind of did that too. They instead of doing like the more traditional jobs, I'm not gonna say that the millennials are the reason why like manual labor jobs are technically demonized by a lot of people. It used to be you could say, "Oh, I'm the electrician." I'm an electrician, and people go, respectable field. I appreciate, like we appreciate you working there. Now it's like people are like, oh, I'm an electrician. They're like, or sorry, electricians, they actually get a little bit more respect. Let me go. Oh, I'm a plumber. appreciate the work that you do. You keep up with that. Now it's like, I'm a plumber. It's like, ew,
You're a plumber.
somebody couldn't get through college.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
I mean,
it's like, what
but
the fuck? When did that
yeah,
happen? You know,
it,
we demonize the blue collar. Now
well,
everybody wants to
yeah,
be white collar. And, you know, granted, I would argue Gen Z is kind of reversing that a little bit. We are kind of going back to, well, you know, we don't want to get a degree in business, or we don't want to get a degree in finance. We're
right.
perfectly fine with, you know, going to work. Like, we want to work. And obviously there's a lot of money in HVAC,
Doing,
in
yeah,
plumbing, in
just
all this stuff.
trades.
And it takes,
Yeah,
trades. And they don't take as long, and they don't cost as much either.
right.
You know, and
Those would be the fields that a student loan would make sense in, by the way, because
exactly,
they're super,
I
super,
agree.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're
they're
marketable.
super
Like,
cheap.
you're always
Yeah,
going to need a plumber. You're always going to need an HVAC guy. You're always
exactly.
going
You're
to,
always going to need an
yeah,
electrician.
you're always going to need construction workers. Like, that's,
Exactly. And
you know,
and another thing is like, a lot of people, they're like, they go directly out of high school, and
yeah,
it's like, you know, the fact that we got rid of wood shop in general education, now that's more of a vocational thing, or we got rid of auto body shop for a lot of places, and
yeah,
it's like, you demonize the blue collar. And the problem with that is you're going to get a lot of people that realistically could have been great as blue collar workers. Now they're going to try to go get a
yeah,
white collar job, or they're going to go get a useless degree. And that's not, you know, like, and I would argue, yes, obviously the boomers and the Gen Xers were part of the reason behind that. I was raised by a boomer and a Gen Xer, by the way, for the most part.
yeah.
Both my biological parents were Gen Xers. My stepfather was a boomer. He's the last of the boomers, so younger boomer. My point being is, you have that whole, like, the demonizing of, oh, if you're not in the medical field, or if you're not in a white collar job,
Right.
you're not utilizing your life. And, you know, that's where you have a lot of millennials that, like, oh, I got a liberal arts degree because I was told, so long as I have a degree in college, whether, no matter what the field is, I can at least guarantee a job later on down the line. And that used to be the case,
Right.
but now
What?
it's gotten
Yeah.
to the point where a high school degree is completely fucking useless. You can't get anything past a minimum wage job with a high school degree, within reason, obviously. And then now you have the point where even an associate, or a what comes after associates? I know there's bachelor's is 4 years, associates is 2 years, and a master's is 6 years, right?
Yeah.
It's getting to the point where a bachelor's degree is becoming about the equivalent of a high school education back 30 years ago.
Right. Just because
It's
of
getting to that
yeah.
point.
Just because of the amount of demand there is for degrees, and I would actually make the argument that it isn't a degree that will get you places. It's experience at the end of the day, because
Exactly.
I know some people who don't have degrees that are successful, and so it's like, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, like, let's say that the economy hits a really rough patch and people start getting laid off. Who are they going to hire? Are they going to hire a guy with an associate's degree? Or are they going to hire
A guy that's
somebody
got like 10
with,
plus years in the field.
yeah, or are they going to hire someone that just got a boot camp, like got out of like this coding boot camp or whatever? No, it's going to be the guy that has several projects under his belt and that can do it with, you know, proficient, like just can do it proficiently. Done, you know.
Yeah.
He already knows the expectations. You don't need to, you know,
Exactly.
do all
And
that
the
stuff.
problem with that is, those people that have that experience or have that pride, they're starting to get to the point. I'm not saying, like, I'm obviously saying, like, if it's like 10 plus years experience, right? You know, those guys are going to eventually get to the point where you're going to have fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer. And because they're either going to be going to jobs that they already like, or they're retiring. And the problem with that is when all of your people with experience retire, what do you have left? Everybody that doesn't have experience.
Yeah. Nobody has experience.
And
right.
So that's the problem with like these entry level positions. It's like, okay, we're calling it entry level, but we want you to have 5+ years experience. It's like, but I can't
Which
get
is
the
an entry
experience
level.
anywhere else.
Yeah.
That's not entry level. That's
yeah.
intermediate. I would argue that it is intermediate. You know, like if you're
right.
asking for X amount of experience, that's an intermediate job. But an entry level job, I would argue 1 to 2 years is fine. But if everybody's expecting 1 to 2 years for an entry level job, you're going to have those people that don't have that 1 to 2 years. They need to get that 1 to 2 years. And
right.
apprenticeships aren't really a thing anymore. So there's a lot of different elements of it that go into the reason why it seems like Gen Z doesn't want to work. It's not that we don't want to work, it's that nobody fucking wants us. And
Right.
that's the problem.
Yeah. I would also make the argument that there aren't really jobs that people want to work in either. Like they're just really crappy jobs. And I'm not even talking about plumber. I'm talking about like jobs where you can't even level up or get a career in. And it's just like,
Yeah.
where do I even go from here? Like there's no upward potential. It's just a dead end
Right.
job. And I think a lot of people feel like that those are the only jobs available. And so, I mean,
Exactly.
but I kind of go back to saying I don't think this is going to be forever. This isn't going to be like an
No.
indefinite thing. But
We're
I do
we're
think,
already starting to see it kind of reel back a little bit as
yeah,
well.
I would say that this is just like a state of the economy, so to speak. Like it's just, I mean, it's just tough right now. I think things will get better. It's just tough, you know.
Yeah, it's
So
tough. It's a tough job market out there.
I'm
And
guessing that,
of course, we are trying to find that work life balance. We are trying to find we are trying to prioritize our own mental health. We're not trying to just work ourselves to death. That's
right,
what a lot of our parents or our grandparents did. And sure, that worked out okay for them. But then, that's why you had a lot of midlife crisis. They realized like, oh my God, I've done nothing but work and raise a kid. I have no life really. I didn't get to live anything. Aside from
yeah,
an occasional vacation, I don't really get to do anything. And so with that, I'm not saying that we need like, oh, we need 3 months of vacation. No, obviously not. I mean, if you're a teacher, you kind of get that anyways. But that's besides the point. Uh, so from that, it just becomes a situation where it's like, well, what the fuck do you want us to do, right?
right.
And I think definitely changing the work field where it's like you're not just another employee number, and you're not going to just get stuck with a dead end job, right? So Dalton, since you like to talk about technology, you like to talk about chat gpt and all this AI stuff, technology's role in our approach to work, what is your perspective on that?
I think honestly, there's a lot of fear with technology. There's also a lot of excitement with it. The
Yes,
excitement ultimately stems from, look, there's this shiny new thing that we have, and
exactly.
this is really cool, and it has human-like features. It can remember past conversations, and it can do things faster, much faster than any other human can. And so, you also have the fear aspect of it. There are people who are afraid because now where you had a lot of these jobs that really took, that required a lot of manual labor, and I would argue because there was a lot of intermediary tasks that were involved, or even mundane tasks. All of those mundane tasks that, because they were mundane, there were jobs available specifically to complete that task. So like you have like bureaucratic positions specifically made to be like, okay, well, you have to take this paper to like basically give your cup of like fill your cup of coffee, give it to your boss, sort of thing, like that kind of task. Now you
Yeah,
have AI basically streamlining that entire process of research and art and everything you can think of. And the way that most people have been using it is to create art with it. And, you know, uh, but I also think it can be used to streamline research. So much more than just creating art. And I think what that will do is it'll only make development go 10 times faster, basically.
agreed.
So, I have this friend who, he majored in data science and he codes. And, imagine what you can do, how much you can code, one project, whereas just manually doing it, but doing it through AI. You can do it like that, like just 10 times faster and much more proficient with less mistakes. And
Right.
so I think artificial intelligence will take away jobs at the end of the day, but I also think there will be a shift. And, I think there will be more like within the next, I'd say 10 years, like 10 to 15 years, what you're going to see is people basically go from, oh, I had this job in, maybe it was data entry or whatever, or I had this job in, I was doing art, or maybe it was something else. I was doing paperwork. And now I think you're going to see a shift in physical labor, in trades and crafts and, construction and that kind of stuff. And I think it will, I know, I think it'll be really interesting, to look at, something that I know other generations have experienced. This isn't anything new to what others have experienced in the past. It's just a faster version. It's just
Exactly.
10
It's
times
going to be
faster.
similar to it's going to be similar to automation versus line work.
Yeah, it is automation basically. Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
essentially. Right. So I think
And
that is something to look into.
I,
I
I
agree. You know.
I think I think what it'll do in a broader sense is it'll save a lot of companies money. Rather than paying somebody, you basically have your own data center. And now you pay the electricity rather than a department of people's wages, which on one
Exactly.
hand is kind of unfortunate, and then on the other hand, it's it's kind of exciting. It just makes things
Yeah.
easier. You know,
So, perfect example is my fiance because she's having to apply for schools, right? To teach. She used ChatGPT to come up with a cover letter.
yeah,
And I mean, I would argue as far as like how it affects our approach to working, I would argue it's not really the approach to working, depending on what field you're in. I would argue it's more of an approach to how you apply. And to some degree, that's terrifying, right?
yeah,
That's going to be a little scary thinking that, oh, well, these people are just, it's going to kind of feed into the whole, oh, they're lazy. Well, every generation's technically been called fucking lazy. Let's be
yeah.
perfectly
By
honest.
older
Since the
generations.
I was gonna say even the baby boomers were called lazy by the silent
Yeah,
generation.
no,
Hell, the baby boomers were the hippies.
basically, yeah.
So every
It's
every generation
yeah.
has that stigmata against them, or the stigma against them. My apologies. Stigmata is the hole through the hand. Sorry, I'm also fidgeting with this. Um,
I'm fidgeting with
so
this too, so
yeah,
we have our
these
own
are
fidget toys.
yeah. Well, these are for my computer. So
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I've used cover letters. I know of a few people, even at church. There's his brother in the church who's like, yeah, I use ChatGPT to create a cover letter or to create to patch up my resume and that stuff. And
right,
so, um, it'll definitely make things. It'll change a lot. I also think school should accommodate for this. Kind of like how we talk about taxes. It used to be taxes was a part of the school curriculum. You would take a civics class, and then they would teach you how to do your taxes. Like that was a part of the school curriculum, which I think they need to bring that back. I think they
oh
really.
yeah, that's something
I think
that
it's
teach
terrible.
life skills
Yeah,
versus memorization.
it's
I
really
agree, and
unfortunate.
that's something that I also think would be a really good topic is talking about the state of public education and
Yeah,
like all the different changes, some for good, obviously, some for worse.
yeah.
There's a lot of elements that go into that.
Right.
So
But to your
from that,
to
mhm,
your point about there being it feeds into the fear. I'd say that's valid. The only thing I would say to that is, people who say, they're creating laws on how to regulate Chat GPT and AI.
mhm.
And so what I would say to that is, yes, can it be used for propaganda? Absolutely. It already
Oh yeah,
has.
I'm sure.
AI has been used to scam people, to make them sound like executives from a workforce. Like it's been done.
Yeah,
Basically everything that let me put it this way, anything that ChatGPT can do, humans have already done it, right?
exactly.
Just think about that. It's like we're not this isn't literally all we're doing, like in that aspect. Yeah, will it make it easier for them to do that? Yes, but we've already been doing this since the dawn of man. All of the evils you can conjure up with AI will just be streamlined, through ChatGPT. But you can also do good with it. So it's that aspect of free will. You know, what are you going to do? Are you
Yes.
going to help people, or are you going to hurt people?
Exactly. And that's the problem.
Yeah,
So, kind of wrap it up a little bit. What do you think there could be what do you think millennials, and let's just not even like specify it down to millennials, let's specify that, because I would argue millennials more or less can understand where we're coming from to certain degrees.
yeah.
I would argue let's talk about like the Gen Xers, the boomers, that kind of thing. Where would you what would you say something that other generations and Gen Z can learn about each other. So, in my opinion, I would argue work ethic from the boomers. I don't
Yeah.
disagree with that they do have a really, really, really good work ethic. Do I think it's to the detriment of themselves?
Yeah,
Yes,
sometimes. They're
sometimes.
yeah,
But I would argue that work ethic of, no, I
right.
got to go to my job. I don't care if I'm fucking vomiting.
Yeah.
At least if I go to my job, I'm showing up and they can send me home if they feel like it. You
I
know,
I feel yeah, I feel like if there's anything that like when it comes to like the luxuries we have now, the fact that we're able to even consider work as a luxury is because of boomers and Gen Xers. People who are like,
correct.
I got to do this because at the end of the day, like who? I mean, I really I don't like to say this. I think this is bad to a degree.
Mhm.
This is bad. Who's really running the country at the end of the day?
It's
Old
the boomers.
people. Yeah.
It's the
I mean,
old
I
people.
hate
Yeah,
I hate to say it like that, but it's true. They built this country, and because of that, we can literally have a discussion and say, well, look, work. It is life isn't all about work, right? You
exactly.
know,
You have to have that work-life balance, and that's what I would argue Gen Z and millennials to some degree are.
right?
At least some elder millennials are learning it, and then I would argue some younger millennials are already implementing it, and then Gen Z is just taking it and running.
I
So,
yeah, I would
obviously,
yeah, I would
yeah.
make the argument that millennials are probably the best at that kind of balance. I mean,
Mhm,
the millennials I know, like I had a band director back in high school. He was a millennial, and
mhm.
like his sort of thing, he spent time with his children at work, but he also worked. I mean, being a band director of a high school, that's a lot of freaking work. And
Oh
so
yeah.
I think a lot of it just comes from the job you choose. But at the same time, he found a way to figure it out. He also get his master's degree while spending time with his family, while also,
Yeah,
going
being
to
a
work.
band
It's
director.
it's like, oh
That's
my god,
that's
like
a
how do you
that's a
do
work
that?
ethic right there.
Yeah,
And it really comes down to planning. I would argue that, yes. So, this kind of bleeds into the bridging the gap between generational mindsets. So I agree definitely if we learn from each other versus, just like, oh, I don't like the fact that you do that. Well, I fucking don't like the fact that you do this shit. What the fuck are you thinking about that with that? Like that mentality is arguably how nothing gets done.
yeah,
Right? So if you want to make something to where everything can get done, that's where you're going to have to like bridge the gap. You're going to have to compromise. Every great relationship, whether it be a partner, whether it be a group project, whether it be government, whether it be anything that involves a group of people, compromise is the number one way to get almost anything done. Don't get me wrong, brute force can eventually work. Yes.
right,
But at what cost?
right,
That's the problem. So if you want the most peaceful way to get anything done, it comes down to compromise. And I would argue a lot of these places are like, oh, I don't hire Gen Z because they're difficult. Well, yeah, we are going to be difficult. I'm not going to say we aren't. A lot of
right,
us don't know what the fuck we're doing. You have a lot of hell, some of our mid-range or younger Gen Z, they're coming out of high school, you know, basically not even knowing how to they all they know is mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell and some other math shit. That's it. They don't know any
yeah,
other life skills. What the fuck else do you expect? Sometimes you gotta be. I'm not saying you need to be the parents, obviously, but sometimes you have to. And to those kids that are like, oh, if I didn't get the job, I'm gonna call my parents, and not 15 minutes later, they're gonna show up at the job and they're gonna argue for me to have a job, even though I blew the job interview.
right. Which is
Grow
pretty
the fuck up.
retarded. Yeah, it's
Oh yeah,
retarded.
yeah, it's stupid, retarded.
Yeah,
Grow the fuck up. For those of you that do that,
yeah,
grow the fuck up. Your parents are not always gonna be there. You gotta have some self sustainability. Almost had a
right,
stutter there. So, with that, I would argue there is that mindset of like, okay, we do have to have some form of independence. You can't be, oh, I'm Miss Independent. It may sound sexist. You can't be, I'm Mr. or Mrs. Independent, and then also say, yeah, but if somebody doesn't go my way, I'm gonna call my parents, and they're gonna
right.
take care of it for me. No, I would argue that's not something you need to do. Now, do I think it is important to contact your parents, let them know what all is going on? Yes, I
Sure.
agree
Yeah.
with that. Definitely have a healthy relationship with your parents. But if you're expecting them to do shit for you, how the fuck are you going to cope whenever they die?
Yeah.
Whenever they're gone, or if they just randomly decide to cut you off, that that mindset will not help you in life. You need to have a way of doing time management. And I would argue that's something that definitely should be taught in schools is time management. A time management class. That would be perfect. Time management. You can talk about taxes, like how to do your taxes, how to know how to do your taxes and all this other stuff. You could do that, and then you could still have your core classes. But I would argue make those two your core classes. The fact that if let's say by middle school you notice that somebody really isn't like the most inept at or adept inept, I forget the word, the most capable of memorizing everything or doing really really well on tests. Well, why don't you, but then you do notice that, oh, they're really good at learning hands-on stuff. Push them towards a vocational route. I'm not saying push them to vocational school. I'm just saying push them towards a certificate program. Push them towards a what was the word you used?
Trade or
Trade. Yeah, push them towards a trade. Figure out where they can kind of memorize a lot of that stuff, or like where they could really work on it. Like if you notice that they love to take stuff apart and put it back together again, introduce them to auto body shop. I would argue that that's ways to help necessarily help prepare, and obviously as far as like preparing them for the work world, in a perfect world they'd be able to do that coming out of high school. I'm not going to say they wouldn't, in a perfect world, but it's not a perfect world. So unfortunately there's going to have to be people to step up and teach these people this. So and the problem is everybody else is like, oh well, I already got my own problems. Why the fuck do I got to teach a kid something? It's like, well, they're a kid. First and foremost, you just called them that, whether or not they're 10 years younger than you or they're 30 years younger than you.
Yeah.
They still need to learn something from you. I'm not going to say they're going to be the most easy people to teach. Obviously not. But you need to have that element of it. And I'm not saying we expect all this. But it would be nice to have it, I would argue a lot of trades, they are very good at that. If you get someone that's maybe 10, 15 years on you, they typically tend to treat you all right. Whereas, and even then, if you have somebody that has like 40 plus years on you, they also tend to treat you all right. It's something about that like mid range where it's like 30 to like 20 to 30 years. They treat you like you're dirt. I don't know.
And
I've noticed that.
It really depends on where you go to, because I remember, you and I worked at Lowe's, and there were some.
Correct.
Oh my goodness! Like honestly, every time someone came in, I thought they were divorced or something. Like they were going through some alimony. I'm like, bro, like you gotta chill out.
Exactly.
But most people are pretty chill about it. But let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
So any positive final thoughts?
Any positive final thoughts?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good question. So I would argue, as far as positivity goes, I know we kind of went all over the place as far as the millennials, pet parents, and then we went straight into Gen Z work rate, and then we kind of went back to, like, I know we went all over the place with this episode, but I would argue as far as positive thoughts is don't give up hope whenever it comes to the dating field, obviously. There are plenty of people out there. You just got to find the right people to go with.
Yeah.
Get out of your comfort zone. I would argue, like, if there's any positive message you could take out of this is just be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I'm not saying like you need to do that when everything, but whenever it comes to social standpoints, sometimes you got to get out of your comfort zone. You got to get out of your echo chamber. As far as the financial aspect of it, that's a completely different video. That would be more of a Dalton thing. But as far as, like life skills, I would argue, yes, you need to learn them as quickly as possible. Getting out of high school. So obviously, take it with a grain of salt. But if your parents are able to, ask them for some life skills. Ask questions. That's the biggest thing, I would argue. If you're getting into the work field, especially if it's trade, ask questions, man. Like, this is coming from experience from somebody who really didn't ask the questions till it was too little too late. Ask the questions. Like, you gotta ask questions. You gotta get comfortable with people that are gonna have different perspectives from you. You gotta get comfortable with, again, you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah. Hey, sometimes the challenge is exciting, man.
Yeah, sometimes.
So
And I mean, I get it. Life's gonna get hard sometimes. I'm not gonna say it isn't. But that
yeah,
doesn't mean you need to immediately give up on it. It's like, oh no, this one thing that slightly inconvenienced me. Well, it's time for me to shut away for 50 years. It's like, no, you can't do that. That's not a healthy way of living. You gotta
right.
confront that shit.
Yeah,
So
you got to be
this has been my
adaptable.
TED Talk. Thank you for listening to me. Dalton, what about you?
Yeah, I think you pretty much summed it up, and I mean, there's really nothing more I can add to that. Honestly, it's just
However, if we
life
were talking about
is.
the stock market,
I
it's
would be all over that. Yeah, I would. There's so much to talk about.
there
In
is,
one
there
of
is.
these videos, in one of these podcasts, we will definitely talk about that. But
Yeah.
anyways, I think that sums it up, and
Hmm.
for the next podcast. See you guys later.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see you all later. Godspeed.
Godspeed.